Hello and welcome back to another episode of Zero BS Estate Agency. Now, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, you're an estate agent. And it could be that your marketing looks busy, but actually it's pretty ineffective. How I know that is because I've been there, right? But this episode will explain why. You see, most agents don't lack effort, but they do lack clarity. So they're trying to appeal to everyone, posting whatever they think they're supposed to be posting, and wondering why the wrong sellers keep on calling. In this episode, I'm joined by Rowan Waller, and we strip back marketing to what actually works. We talk about how to define your ideal client properly, why storytelling beats brag post every time, and how to stop measuring success by likes and the simple frameworks that turn attention into instructions. This isn't about doing more, but it is, though, doing about the right things on purpose. If you want better sellers, better conversations, and fewer wasted valuations, this episode matters. So Rowan, if an agent listening right now could change just one thing about their marketing this week to attract better sellers, what should it be, and why does that one thing matter more than anything else?
It's an interesting question because the temptation is to go into an answer that's about an actual a marketing technique. I think you should go if you could do one thing, I'd go a step ahead of that, a step before. Because if you want to attract better sellers, you first have to understand what better looks like, right? So you need to know what good looks like, and what bad looks like, and then what better than good looks like, right? So, and that probably depends on what you've currently got and what you're fighting with, or just having these occasional good ones. You go, oh God, I wish we had more like that, right? So I think the first thing to do is, if you haven't done it as an agent, is to go back and do a sort of an ideal client exercise in the first place. And then all of the marketing activity can then kind of spiral off that. So when you're doing this sort of ideal client exercise, that's about understanding who your ideal customer is, and that could be all sorts of things, right? So that could be, so people might say, if you ask an agent what their ideal client is, they might tell you, I really want people who are selling £1 million to £2 million houses in this particular postcode. And then you have to go, well, okay, have you sold any of them before? They go, yeah. I mean, it was our best sale last year. So, we put it on, it was £2 million. We had £30,000, which just cleared the whole monthly kind of outgoings in just one fee. You say, okay, well, how long did it take to actually get to that sale when you were marketing it? And then how long did the sale? And if they work it back and it turns out actually it was an 11-month process from start to finish, and maybe that isn't their ideal client. It could be, or it could not be. But it's about understanding what that client is, what type of properties they're selling, but it's more than just the actual property and the fee at the end of it. So when you're doing this exercise, this should be about demographics. This should be about age and gender. It should be about what their values are and their behaviors. It should be about where they shop, right? So you could then ask yourself this question in a different way once you've got to who your ideal client is, and start thinking about where they, what newspaper does your ideal client read, or what television shows, or where do they hang out on a Sunday morning? And that's a really good one, actually, because if you can then find out that actually my ideal client is a 58-year-old man who's coming up to retirement, and he goes down the bowling club on a Sunday morning. Perfect, right? So you can now think, well, what marketing activities could I do to hit that person? You could literally go down to the bowling club. You could go and see what kind of events have you got coming up in the league. What could we help you promote? Do you need extra participants in your club? Could we help you find them? We'll do a little social media campaign to get more people into the club, and then you become a sort of a person of influence in that environment where your ideal clients are sitting, and they start to get to know you in a way that they wouldn't have done before. So,
but also you're speaking their language as well, right? So
yeah.
if you know your ideal client, I'm taking from what you're saying. If you know who your ideal client is, and then you know what their pain points are,
that's it,
and
exactly.
You know the frustrations they've had in the past. Now you're speaking the same language as those guys, so they feel like they have affinity. Would that be true?
That's exactly it. So it's not just about knowing who they are. It is, and pain points is where I was coming to. So you need to know what what their values are, what their pain points are, what questions they're asking, and then how can you provide them that solution? So you provide the solution to these specific people who are your ideal clients, asking specific questions, rather than trying to do a catch-all. So if you, I think it was Seth Godin said something like, if you make a product for everybody, then you make a product for nobody. And it's exactly the same for marketing. In fact, I think that might be my LinkedIn post today. So, if you're trying to appeal to everyone, you'll become too broad and you'll appeal to no one. So it's about niching down, focusing down, identifying very specific questions, problems, pain points, and going, right, this is how we as an agency provide the solution to that. And that's when you can then think about your marketing. So first of all, it's understand the problem and where they are, and then you can start to apply whatever marketing methods they might be in a more strategic way.
So I'm going to do a Chris Watkin, and I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to say, well, hang on a moment, I'm an estate agent. I'm not a marketing business, right? And also, my clients are everyone. My clients are everybody in my location. What do you say to that?
Well, this is why you work out who your ideal clients are. So if you are an agent that says, you know what, we do deal with everyone, that's absolutely fine. But everyone isn't ideal. So you can still deal with everyone, but you want to know who's ideal. If you're going to be spending money and effort on finding some clients, make sure the money and effort you spend is on the ideal clients, not on the everyone. Because we've all been dragged down I was in agency for 20 years before I went into marketing. I'm not necessarily a marketer. I provide one or two marketing services within a broad range of marketing services that are on offer out there. So I'm a small bit of marketing. Marketing departments will sort of go through this exercise with people rather than me necessarily. But the point is that if you are trying to hit everyone with effectively a broad brush, then the message just gets diluted. So your ideal clients don't think you're necessarily interested in them, and actually the kind of the sort of the bread and butter market doesn't necessarily think you're in for them either, because they see you focusing on properties that don't look like them, or areas that aren't theirs, or whatever it might be in this sort of catch-all. You don't tell the specific stories because you think actually that bit of the story that's too specific. That particular nugget of joy that client got from me was all down to their own lifestyle, and that's not going to appeal to somebody who's, So yes, I got their children moved into school before the deadline. That's a brilliant story, but actually, it's not going to appeal to people who are downsized because they're retired and their kids left home. So I'm just going to leave that out. Well, actually, you've just lost your whole marketing hook and the leverage that you had from that story. You've decided actively to not tell it, and in not telling it, you've then failed to leverage all of that gold that you had locked in to that particular sale that you could have brought out from a marketing exercise. You've left it on.
I totally agree with that, right? I totally agree with that. And so if we go to my website, the opening gambit on my homepage is for sale, but still not sold, ?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because my ideal clients are not first-time sellers. My ideal client are people that have been through the mill, realize that they've made a mistake, and they're like still locked into a contract, and they're like, oh, I just need to get rid of this current agent who said things that sounded nice. They've won the instruction. They've told me what I wanted to hear, and now there's crickets. And now I'm stagnant on the market. And the only thing they're saying to me in terms of what can we do next is, we'll make a few calls to contacts. We'll see what happens. Yet I was expecting someone to be properly project managing my business. And imagine that if you truly are that agent who truly project manages people from cradle to grave, from the before it's even gone to market to the point of completion, and you're still looking after them after completion for whatever reason that may be, but yet your local market doesn't actually know that. And I think that's where you come in, right?
It is. So this bit is where I come in. So once we've identified them, and then that your strategy is going to be, how do we get more of these people? That's where somebody like me comes in to do certain things in the marketing. So actually, to answer your original question is, what can people do? So what people can do in this circumstance is to once that pain point, you'd have to hook them by identifying that pain point in a story, right? So when I write content, I'm a storyteller. I come at it from a narrative point of view, rather than a kind of a data point of view, for example. So I'm looking at what the stories are and how do you suck the stories out and then because we are a storytelling race, right? We as human beings, we absolutely love stories. It's hardwired into our DNA over 2 million years of evolution, because this is how humans kind of got out of the caves and actually started, building houses and building communities, right? And that's through storytelling and shared social norms and everything else. So it's about the story. So I've got a client who had she'd sold a house that had been on the market with 2 other agents over the course of a whole year, and she managed to sell it in a week. So it had no viewings over that year, no viewings. I mean, that's mad. Therefore, no offers. And these clients were getting frustrated because effectively they were kind of being told it's the market, it's a bit slow, and we're doing all this, but nothing was happening. Anyway, my client put it on the market, and 2 weeks later, she had a buyer. Now, was that luck? Was it? Doesn't matter what it was. The point is, there's a story there. So identifying this, because otherwise, what agents tend to do is put something out that sounds, unfortunately, like a brag instead. So it's like, we've just basically beaten those agents. That's what we've done. We've beaten those agents, and that's not necessarily what the market wants to hear. There's a story there that tells people that you've beaten the agents. You just don't need to go and broadcast it like that. But the story here was, and she wasn't doing it the other way around. We were just going, what could we do? And this is a great story. How do we tell this story? So we took that story and I turned it into a sort of mid-length post. I actually said this might end up being slightly too long on Facebook, because Facebook likes sort of 80 to 120 words, basically. But Facebook can enjoy longer posts. They have to be engaging though, because the algorithm also rewards dwell time. So if you actually manage to hook people on, they stay on your post, and then Facebook will reward that and expose it a little bit more. But it has to be really captivating. So there's always a slight risk in doing longer form as a post rather than a very short form post that links to a long form blog, which is what we typically do. So this time I was like, you know what, you don't want a whole blog about this story. 800 words, 1,000 words is going to be too long. But let's see if we can nail it in 400, 500 words. I think it was like 540 words in the end. And we told this story about a couple who had moved from one area to another because they'd had children. So they had 2 young preschool children, and they were moving to be near a family. Plus it was down by the beach. They got the beach lifestyle, and they'd done this and it had a great time. And 3 years later, however much they'd been enjoying their house, it was time to move on because the kids were getting bigger, older, they need more space. So they had to go on the market, and they did the natural thing, went on the market with a local agent, and nothing happened. And then that happened again over the course of a year. So by the time they came to us, they were desperate, right? So you can hook people who are feeling these pain points. This is about pain points right at the start of that post. You hook them in, someone's in pain. This is how we dealt with it. And then you start to tell this story. And then by the end of the story, and in fact, in this case, it's like, we didn't do anything magic. We just did the basics well. This is what a estate agency is. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are things that just need to be done properly. Good photographs, proper marketing, a big campaign on social media, which is always, people like to hear this because this is something that's, although it shouldn't be new, people think it's new. The customers out there think it's new. Anyway, and then we got the result in 2 weeks, and it's gone through, and everyone's happy. So there's a story there, but and within a day, so this is yesterday morning. So it posted yesterday morning on a Sunday, and by yesterday afternoon, she had a DM from somebody saying, "I've seen your post, and can you come and value my house?" Right. So that is, and it hasn't got that many. It hasn't got that many likes. I actually posted yesterday to say, don't worry about the likes and the shares and the comments. It's vanity. It's great to have them, but you tend to get those out of the fun posts. You tend to, if you do something like a jokey post or a silly dance, you get a lot of likes, but it doesn't necessarily build the authority. This post has, I think it's got 10 or 11, so it's not doing badly out there compared to normal. But the point is, it's got the result. So it's the impact that post has had. It's not the metrics that matter. It's what has that done to move her needle, basically. That's moved her business forwards.
And I love that, Rowan, right? And I absolutely, because, that is so true. For me, if I get invited, if I was doing, for example, no social media, no advertising, no marketing, no nothing, right?
Yeah.
Now, of course, it's an uphill battle. It's an uphill battle because if I'm going to meet 10 sellers, right? Now, my view is, if I'm meeting 10 sellers and I work with just 2 of them, well, I found 100% of my market, right? Because the other 8, I'm not in the convincing business, I'm in the disqualification business. And so I love that story, because what you was just saying then, because actually, if I'm now doing my marketing and my media and so on and so forth, and I'm speaking directly to my ideal clients, the likelihood is I'm only going to get called out by 2 people out of the 10, because the other 8 didn't really resonate with me. But the 2 that have called me out, they've already decided that they're probably working with me as well, which then means it's a lot easier because my fee is 2% minimum. But because they're falling in love with what I'm saying, what I'm doing, I'm not supposed to be appealing to everyone. So when you're talking about maybe just 10 or 11 likes, guess what that is? That's 10 or 11 people you're hoping in your local market that have read that and gone, right, if I'm selling, he or she, that person who just wrote that, is for me. Because I've experienced that before, the pain that they've gone through, and I don't want to experience that again. And like you said, it wasn't a vanity metric, look how well we've done. It was the story behind how well you did.
Do you know what? Tumbleweeds, people always talk about tumbleweed, like a tumbleweed moment, right? As if something doesn't land and you get a tumbleweed. But tumbleweeds shed 250,000 seeds as they're blowing through the desert.
Oh, I love that.
That's what you've got to think about.
Mate, that is such the perfect analogy.
That's a Rowan Wallerism, that.
Mate, that is skills, because you're right. Tumbleweeds, actually, well, what's a tumbleweed doing? That you're laying seeds, and 250,000 of them. That is proper wicked. But let me just ask you another question, right? Because most agents do say that they are different. But when you say look at their website, or you look at their sort of social media, right, or their boards, they are all doing the same thing. What is one practical exercise an estate agent could do in the next 30 minutes to clearly define, right, and communicate their brand?
Okay, 30-minute exercise. Right, so I'll come at it from a content marketing point of view, because that's the area of marketing I'm in. And content falls broadly into 3 types. Okay, so you've got, and I'm not talking about the medium. I'm not talking about Facebook marketing or Instagram marketing or LinkedIn marketing or video marketing or, short or long form post marketing. I'm talking about the actual content itself. So you can think about that maybe as content pillars, right? So it falls into broadly 3 types, which are educational or maybe expertise driven, but you're educating somebody on something that you're putting out there, or with something you're putting out there. It's entertaining. So those are your fun stuff, and your kind of this is where you want to get your likes, maybe. And that's good. That's good profile building. And promotional, right? But agents will typically, they'll end up feeling, not just agents, or any business that's marketing, or any person who's trying to market, they'll become comfortable with 1 or 2 things, maybe, rather than all 3 things. And it's a balance that actually helps give you a rounded persona as a business and attract more clients. So a lot of agents fall into the entertainment trap and put funny stuff out there or fun stuff out there. And actually, you can build a good profile, but you don't necessarily, if that's all of your content, then you don't necessarily get taken seriously enough. Because when somebody might love you, but when they've got a £1 million house to sell, or a £2 million house to sell, or even a £400,000 3-bedroom semi, so that's fairly inexpensive in Oxford, right? But a £200,000 3-bed semi, doesn't matter where it is. Then they might not think, okay, however much I like them, they are really funny, but that's the agent that that's the expert. So I'm going to go with them instead. So you have to have a balance. So your entertaining content is good, but your educational content has a different purpose and a different benefit. So these are your sort of your how to explainers, your market commentary that brings in your data. Right. So it talks about how much property prices have just risen in the area in the last 12 months or in the last 1 month, but it's very hyper local, and you become you're showing your expertise. And then the last type of content, so you've got your educational and you've got your entertaining, and then you've got your promotional. And that tends to be the other sort of trap that agents fall into, is they post, sold property, and it's typically just an image with sold, no storytelling behind it, right? So I'm all for these sold posts, but I want to tell the story, because if you make the story relevant to people, then you can promote the fact you sold it without looking like it's a brag. You're showing how you solve problems rather than how you just earned £4,000, right? So So you've got educational, you've got entertaining, you've got promotional content. And the exercise I would do in half an hour is to go through your last 15 posts and apply the 555 rule, 555 rule of content marketing. So that is basically, you want to have, out of those 15, 5 of each, 5, 5, and 5. So 5 educational, 5 entertaining, and then 5 posts. And whatever, doesn't matter what sort of media they're on or what site, you just go through your last 15 and go, okay, well, out of those 15, actually 8 were entertaining and 3 were expert, and how many have I got left? And 4 were promotional posts. So I'm leaning too heavily on entertaining. And then you can start to work out what you need to do to try and bring some balance back. And I don't know why it's not called the 1-1-1 rule, okay, because it could be, but that's marketing for you. And I think it's because actually it doesn't matter if out of the last 15, the 5 educational posts all came in the last week, and then there was a split in the other 10. It doesn't really matter as long as it averages out at 5, 5, and 5 over the last 15. So that is a good, easy to do half-hour exercise to identify it, and then once you've identified it, you can put your strategy in place to work out what you need to then do to make this balance work.
But it's the consistency. Again, I'm playing devil's advocate. The consistency, Rowan, is so hard to remain consistent and making sure I'm getting that content out there. Is like, do you know what? I've done a couple of posts. I've got 3 or 4 likes. Oh my, this isn't working. I'm giving up. What do you say to that?
Well, being aware of it is a help from the start. So at least if you start to remind yourself that there should be a balance, then once you start to feel like that, you can pull yourself back into it. However, there are easy ways to be a bit more consistent. So you can for a start, plan a content calendar. And so that's a really useful thing to do, and at least give yourself a head start in a week or in a month as to what your content is going to look like over the next 7 days or 28 days or whatever it might be. And then you can create that content. You can spend a day doing it, and you can create, or half a day. It depends what you're doing, but you create the content in advance and then you schedule it. Now you can do that more easily with, like for example, if it's entertaining content, then you can do that quite easily. If it's educational, there are some things that you can do in advance, because your evergreen content that you create can be done at any point and be posted at any point. That's valid all year long. So you could create. I've just done it actually. I've just created 24 posts. 6 are aimed at buyers, 6 are aimed at sellers, 6 are aimed at landlords, 6 are aimed at tenants. So there's 24 posts. That's 2 a month for the next year that agents can have. So every fortnight, I know there's a post out. Agents can have these posts. These are generic posts, so they're not hyper local. I would recommend that people hyper localize them when they've got them, but they can put these posts out, and they're always, doesn't matter if you put it out this month or next month, it's going to be relevant, because it's things like, how does the conveyancing process work, or what type of survey should I book on my house, that I'm how much deposit does a first time buyer need? These are questions. We all know these answers. Well, I say we as if I'm an estate agent still. Estate agents know these answers, and they assume that other people know them, but they don't. So if you start to tell them stuff that's just answering questions, this just becomes really, really valuable educational content. And this might not be the stuff that gets the likes, right? So you put a post out there about how the conveyancing works, you're probably not going to get 100 likes, but you might have just told 100 people that you know what you're talking about. And when they've got this kind of question, they should look you up again, and they should follow you for more. And that's the benefit of these posts. So anyway, you can get your kind of evergreen content written up in advance, and then you can schedule it. There's loads of scheduling tools, but there's now native scheduling tools. You don't even need a third-party software like Hootsuite used to be the one that we all use. But nowadays, you could just go on, on Facebook, for example, you go on the Meta Business Suite, and you can schedule your posts in advance. And even on LinkedIn, I'm scheduling LinkedIn posts all the time. And then they just sit there and go out, and it pops up, and I go, oh, I forgot I'd even done that. That's I quite like that one. So you could do a lot in advance. And let's say you're talking about 15 posts. Well, why not just do 2 of each in advance? And then you've still got some extra that you can then fill in during the week to when things pop up. The things that the long form stuff that I do that you can't really plan in advance is your market commentary stuff. Some of those you can, but if it's a reactive piece, so a lot of the content I produce for agents is reacting to something that's topical. So something has just happened in the market, and I will produce a thought leadership piece for my clients based on that bit of breaking news or whatever it is that puts their opinion out there. Don't get me wrong, I'll talk to my agents and I'll find out what their opinion is. I'm not making it up for them, but I will then put it into words for them and then they can put it out there. And that's something that we've got to do in kind of almost in real time, because I can guess what's probably going to happen with the interest rate decision, but I don't know until Thursday at 12 o'clock. So I have to wait until Thursday. I could get it sort of half written in advance. Then we know that, they have voted to cut it by 0.25%. Brilliant. Finish off the article, pop it out there by 1:30 on Thursday afternoon while it's still relevant, because it's less relevant if I go on Monday morning, right, let's think about what piece I'm going to do. Oh yeah, the interest rate dropped last Thursday. Let's get that out this week. And by the time it's then dropping on the following Tuesday or Wednesday, it's kind of lost its impact. So there's some stuff that you can't plan in advance, but a lot of the stuff you can plan, that's what puts you ahead. So that's the exercise, is look and see if you are balanced. If you're not, know that, okay, I've got to focus a bit more on that, and perhaps I'm spending a bit too much time on that. And just try and strategize for that, and just try and strategize on raising the balance on where you're lacking, or just maybe toning it down if you think, actually, maybe I'm going a bit too heavy on these TikTok dances. Maybe that's not landing after all, and that will move your needle. That will move the dial for you.
So let's bring this episode all together, right? So you have been that negotiator day one, week one. You've been that sales manager. You've been the branch manager. You've been actually an owner, director of your own estate agency, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's now pretend for this moment that you've got your agency head back on with the marketing element and the success you're having with the marketing your clients.
Yeah.
For people that don't know you, right, or for people that don't know necessarily what to do, if you were, as Rowan Waller, dropped into a new town tomorrow as an unknown estate agent with no reputation, no budget, what exact marketing or content would you create in your first 14 days, and what would you not bother with?
Good question. So are we no budget, but reputation, or no reputation, but
no reputation, no budget.
It depends whether it's okay. So if you've got no history, no testimonials, no actual sales successes you can talk about, if this is literally a cold start, then I would be focusing on, so you've got to find your first instruction, right? You're a new agent, you've got to actually go out there and try and build a business. So think about your initialisms. So your KLT is a good place to start. So know, like, and trust is how you start to win customers. So first they've got to know you, and that comes from marketing, but then they've also got to like you and believe that you can do it. And that's very hard from a cold start. So when you're thinking about how to not just identify these customers, but then get in front of them and convince them with your message, then you think about not the 5-5-5 rule, but the 3 C's. Do you know what? There's so many rules that are called the 3 C's of marketing. But the one I'm looking at is C for creation, C for curation, and then C for conversation. All right. So these are when you've got no budget, these are places you can start. Now the creation has to be the free stuff you can do if you've got no budget, realistically. So you're talking about the stuff that you can do on social media. That's where you have to look. So you can obviously build your page, start putting your content on there, and make it from the start very valuable. You have to get into these Facebook community groups as well, and some ban you from it, or they only let you post on a Sunday. So you've got to think about that. So if you are limited to what you can put out there, it has to be really engaging, really valuable, right? So stuff that is probably the pain point stuff, the stuff that answers the questions that are going to make people click in and carry on. But it might be less valuable, the creation side of it, than the curation in the first 14 days when you've got no reputation. So curation is where people often let themselves down. I think about the creation is like, obviously it's what makes sense, creating the content, putting it out there. You show that your logo's on there and that your name's up there. And that's where people go to in their heads. The C for creation. The C for curation is where you are, basically you share other people's stuff. So you show that you are knowledgeable about your field by highlighting what other people are saying is valuable to your potential customers. And that is probably more useful when it's like a national message that aren't going to be local competitors, and then you can share it locally. So for example, like Savills, for example, I mean Savills are everywhere, but they're also national, and the stuff that they would produce, or Knight Frank, that is or Hamptons. So Anita Beveridge Anisha Beveridge of Hampton, she's always putting out gold. It's gold stuff about what the market's doing, what the predictions are, what the forecasts are. And there's no reason as an estate agent that you're not, I mean, you are promoting their brand. They want you to as well. They want you to share this stuff because it does promote their brand. But if you share that post, and you can share it, just share the post. You don't plagiarize it. You should cite people and say, Anisha Beveridge from Hamptons has said that. And you put it out there and you show that because you're an expert, you can understand that this is expert commentary and you think that this is going to be valuable for the local, toaster market. And those people go, oh, brilliant. I hadn't actually read that in the page 14 of the property industry eye, because that's not what I'm doing on a Sunday morning. I'm down there playing bowls. So you're giving them stuff that they're not otherwise reading that says this is stuff that you should know if you're in the market thinking about houses. It's Leach Beveridge from Hamptons, who's a very well-known person, a very well-known firm, is saying that property prices are going to go up by 3% this year. Isn't that good news? So you tell them that. So that's curation. And then conversation is where you get involved in on social media. It is replying to other people's comments. So you're in there in the Facebook group, and what you probably aren't allowed to do is post on Tuesday. I sell houses in your area, and I'm doing a really good discount fee at the moment for my first 20 customers, because they'll can it. The admin won't let it. I'm not saying you should do that either. I think that's terrible marketing, but people do it. But what you can do is you can look on that Facebook community group, and you will see when people say it might be, can you recommend a good estate agent? Got to be careful how you reply to that. But it can just be
me.
Exactly. You really want other people to be recommending you. But it can be general conversation, could be questions. You're looking for the pain points. It can, if people are asking questions, does anyone know a good mortgage broker, for example? That's a good one. Because then you can say, yeah, actually, I'm an estate agent and the mortgage broker we recommend is so-and-so. And you start to just put the word out there without saying, come and use me, come and use me, come and use me. You start putting the word out there that you are an estate agent, and then you start to build your authority and expertise by in conversation. Now, the other thing you can do, if you take it out of social media and if you've got no budget at all, is you want to start to put yourself into spheres of influence. So you can do a lot of free networking. You can do a lot of inexpensive networking. But if you network with the right people, now it's hard to network as an estate agent with people who are selling their houses, but who you can network with people who, those people who are selling houses trust. So for example, if you can get in there with an accountant who's got lots of clients who own houses, because they tend to, or you can get in there with a solicitor who is dealing with probate cases and divorce cases, and you build that relationship through conversation or through giving them, relevant, curation. Even you can get in touch with them and say, look, I do a market update to keep people abreast of what house prices are doing in the area. Would you like me to send you my market report once a month?
And then they share your stuff.
Local solicitors. What solicitor's really going to say no? And then you just start doing it once a month. Might not work. Okay, you asked for a 14-day exercise. It doesn't necessarily work in 14 days, but when's the best time to plant a tree? It's 20 years ago. So, not to do it 20 years ago, start doing it today. And it'll benefit you in 6 months' time. If you start doing it, and every month for 6 months, that solicitor's getting a nice, well-written market report from you with graphs and everything, it shows that you know what you're talking about. They will start to think, oh, this person knows what they're talking about. It doesn't matter if they haven't seen your boards up. It really doesn't. What they're getting is your information for free. And what they will do eventually is go, actually, I've got a client who needs to have a house valued because unfortunately their Auntie Sue's just died. Would you be interested? And then all of a sudden you've got your foot in the door. So this is the stuff that you can do for free. If you've got a little bit more budget, what I genuinely recommend is doing this kind of market report in very hyper local areas. So you pick an area that that person who said earlier they want £1 to £2 million houses in this particular postcode as their ideal client. Is their ideal client, then why not tell everyone in the postcode who you are and what you do? But you don't do it with 2020 flyers. Look at this house. You should do that as well. 2020 flyer, useful. But if you were to create a monthly newsletter that tells people what house prices are doing in this these couple of streets, not just this postcode, what's happening, and not just that. Okay, so you can do the property news, but then you also do what local shop is just opening, what event is coming up at that local hotel's putting on a jazz night on Thursday the 15th, and you can have 4 pages of newsletter that does some market commentary, make it fun, make it valuable in terms of the property content, and then make yourself the local expert. Local expert about property is one thing, but local expert as an expert who is local is another. So if people understand you're local, they start to buy into that as well. And it will cost a little bit because it's going to cost printing, because this is printed stuff. And then you get whatever, 500 of them printed or 1,000 of them printed, and you put your trainers on and you just go and post them through people's doors. And yes, it would have cost you, I don't know, 300 quid probably to get something drawn up and printed. It might cost more. I'm making this up, but it might be money well spent, because if you are hand delivering them, you know that they've been dropped, and it might not work on the first month, and it might not work on the second month, and it might not work on the third month. But I would be convinced that within 6 months of doing that, and 6 months at 300 quid is what, 1,800 quid. Is that right? I think so. You will probably get your first instruction off the back of that in that postcode where you know that houses are worth 1 million to 2 million pounds. And if you're charging 2% like you are, well, that's 40 grand, isn't it? 40
grand, absolutely.
From that 1,800 pounds spent. And maybe you need a new pair of trainers by now because it's been you that's been out there pounding the pavements and posting them through doors. But I think that is more valuable marketing content than your kind of sold down your road stuff. That's useful as well, but people are so used to seeing it now that most of the time it just goes in the bin. Doesn't always. When I was an agent, I used to do it and I used to get sales from it. I used to get instructions from it. So you should be doing that stuff as well. But I just think that there are easier wins that set you apart. Because you'll talk about how do you make yourself different, right? That all agents are the same. Well, actually, this is a way to make yourself look different. This is exactly how you differentiate yourself from competition.
Absolutely. So if we're going to say, right, in the next 60 seconds, if you had to describe who your ideal client is and how listeners, agents listen to this right now, get in contact with you to apply to work with you, who's your ideal client and how do they do it?
My ideal client would be probably self-employed estate agents, either as individual self-employed estate agents or owner-directors of a firm, but probably a small firm. So I'm talking maybe up to 2 or 3 offices, and in a market where they're competing with a kind of a range of other independents and a few corporates, and want to set themselves apart, want to look different, want to tell their stories, want to engage with an audience in this sort of more value-driven way. That's my ideal client. And how can I get in touch with me? I'd lurk on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn, and they can find my website. It's thepropertypen.co.uk.
Excellent. Rowan Waller, mate, thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me. That's been my pleasure.
So, if you take one thing from this episode, let it be this. Better marketing doesn't start with content. It starts with decisions. Decisions about what you stand for. Decisions about what you won't stand for. And which problems you actually want to be known for solving. Because the agents who win long-term aren't the loudest, but they are the clearest. They're clear in their positioning, they're clear in their messaging, and they're clear enough that the right sellers recognize themselves in what's being said well before a valuation has even been booked. So if your competitors are still locking people into long contracts and shouting about how fantastic they are, let them fall on their own sword. Use it. That enables you to tell better stories, show your thinking, and make it obvious who your service is designed for. That's how you attract sellers that choose you. Not because you chase them, but because they already knew. That's the secret. See you on the next episode.